She's nobody, Robert. A shadow. You wasted 5 years on a woman who can't even hold a conversation at dinner.
A wonderful evening,
Stephanie
isn't it?
Moore's voice
Absolutely, a
carried
perfect
across 3
celebration.
tables at
Cheers
the
to that.
Riverfront Hotel ballroom, sharp and deliberate, each word calibrated for maximum humiliation. Her hand slid up Robert Anderson's arm with the possessive ease of someone who had long stopped pretending discretion mattered. The ivory Valentino gown she wore caught the light from the chandeliers, overhead diamonds at her throat glittering as she tilted her head back and laughed. Robert stood beside her, champagne flute raised, that slow, easy smile spreading across his face as he clinked his glass against hers like they were celebrating something worth celebrating. 50 guests heard it. Maybe more. The ones who knew Linda Anderson felt their stomachs drop in that particular way. Stomachs drop when you witness cruelty and do nothing to stop it. But none of them said a word. None of them had seen what was about to walk through those doors. Linda Anderson had not always been invisible. There was a time not so long ago when she walked into rooms and people noticed. When she laughed, it filled the air with something bright and uncontained. When she spoke, people leaned in, genuinely interested in what came next. She had been the kind of woman who made an impression not because she tried to, but because she simply was vivid, alive, present in a way that left marks on the people who knew her. That was the Linda who existed before Robert. She met Robert Anderson at 29 at an industry mixer in downtown Portland where the wine was cheap and the networking was aggressive. He was a marketing manager, then sharp-suited and confident in a way that suggested he knew exactly where he was going and how fast he would get there. He looked at her like she was the most remarkable thing he had ever seen, told her she was vibrant, told her she lit up the room, told her he had never met a woman quite like her. She believed every single word. What Linda did not understand then, what she would spend 5 years slowly learning, was that Robert did not fall in love with who she was. He fell in love with who he thought she could become for him. And the moment she stopped fitting the mold he had built inside his head, he stopped seeing her at all. It started small, the way it always does. A comment about her laugh being too loud for a client dinner. Just a gentle suggestion really delivered with a smile and a squeeze of her hand. Maybe she could tone it down a little, just in certain company. The clients were traditional, conservative. It would help his career if she could be a bit more measured. Linda adjusted. Then came the observation about her clothing. Too bold, he said. Too colorful. The VP track meant dinners with serious people, and serious people appreciated classic elegance, not statement pieces. Did she really need to wear red to a corporate event? Navy would be better. Gray even better than that. Linda's wardrobe shifted toward neutrals, a raised eyebrow when she contradicted him at a dinner party, a quiet word later that night about how it looked when she disagreed with him in front of colleagues. He wasn't saying she was wrong, just that maybe she could save those conversations for when they were alone. It made him look weak when his own wife questioned him publicly. Linda learned to nod and smile. Tiny things, each one easy to explain away, each one easy to forgive. Each one easy to absorb into the long list of accommodations she made because she loved him, and because love, she had been taught, meant compromise. But over 5 years of marriage, those tiny things had stacked up into something that weighed on her like stones. By the time Linda turned 34, she had become a quieter version of herself. More careful, more measured, less likely to speak first, less likely to push back. Less likely to remind Robert or anyone else that she had ever been the kind of woman who filled a room. She had given up her freelance design work because Robert said clients at her income level were a distraction when he was climbing toward a vice president title at Davidson Logistics. The project she took paid $22,000 a year now, down from $65,000. She worked from the spare bedroom that had once been her studio. The drafting table moved to the garage because Robert said it made the house look cluttered. She had stopped going out with her old friends because Robert preferred they socialize as a couple, and his idea of socializing meant sitting at tables she found suffocating, talking about promotions and stock options and the best private schools for children they did not have. She had rearranged herself piece by piece until she fit into the shape that Robert needed. Smaller, quieter, less. And still, it was never enough. The first time she found out about Stephanie Moore, she was not looking. She never was looking. Linda was not the suspicious kind because she had never had reason to be. She had loved Robert without condition, believed deeply and honestly that whatever rough patches they went through were just the friction of two lives lived close together. She found the message on his phone because he had left it on the kitchen counter while he went to answer the door. November 15th, 7:30 in the evening. The screen lit up with a notification she happened to glance at. Not explicit. Worse than explicit. Last night was everything. Still thinking about your hands. S. Linda stood in her kitchen holding that phone for what felt like a very long time. Her hands did not shake. Her breathing did not change. She simply stood there, the phone warm in her palm, reading those 17 words over and over until they stopped meaning anything at all. She set it down exactly where she had found it, walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, held her wrists under the stream until her skin went numb. Robert came back into the kitchen carrying a package, setting it on the counter with the casual ease of someone who had no idea his entire marriage had just shifted on its axis. "Want coffee?" Linda's voice came out steady, normal, like she had not just discovered her husband was sleeping with someone else. "Yeah, thanks." Robert did not look up from his phone as he scrolled through work emails. Linda made the coffee. That was 5 months ago. In those 5 months, Linda had done something that even she did not fully understand at first. She did not confront Robert. She did not scream or throw things or demand answers. She went quiet in a different way than before. Not the quiet of someone who had made themselves small. The quiet of someone who was watching, paying attention, deciding. The first week she told herself it might be a mistake. A client named S, maybe. Someone from work. Innocent. Explainable. The second week she checked his phone while he was in the shower. Found more messages. Not many, but enough. Enough to know that S was Stephanie, and Stephanie worked at Elite Brand Partners, and Stephanie was beautiful in the way women who spend a great deal of money on looking effortless are beautiful. The third week, Linda Googled Stephanie Moore and stared at the LinkedIn profile photo for 20 minutes. Tall, elegant, polished. The kind of woman who walked into rooms and knew exactly who was worth talking to. Linda remembered her vaguely from a company event 2 years ago. She had not felt threatened then. She understood now what she had failed to see. Robert had been comparing them for years. By the 4th week, Linda began tracking Robert's schedule. The overtime shifts that fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays like clockwork. The late nights that always ended with him coming home at 10, smelling like cologne he did not wear in the morning. In the 5th week, she followed him, just once, drove to the Pearl District and watched Robert walk into a high-rise apartment building with Stephanie Moore, her hand on his lower back, both of them laughing about something Linda would never know. Linda sat in her car for 2 hours, cried until her eyes swelled, went home, washed her face, climbed into bed before Robert returned. He never knew. In the 9th week, mid-January, Linda found something worse than the affair. Robert had forgotten to close his laptop. She walked past the dining room table and saw his email inbox still open, a message from his financial advisor sitting at the top of the thread. "Per your request, I've moved $45,000 from joint savings to your personal investment account. Let me know if you need anything else." Linda's chest went tight. She opened their online banking, joint savings account. Checked the transaction history. $78,000. Gone. Transferred over 6 months in increments that were just small enough not to trigger alerts. All of it moved to an account titled R. Anderson Personal Holdings. Not bills. Not investments they had discussed. Just gone. Linda clicked through Robert's credit card statements next. Restaurants she had never been to. Jewelry purchases. A weekend trip to Cannon Beach that Robert had told her was a work conference. Stephanie Moore was being bankrolled with their money. Linda closed the laptop, walked to the spare bedroom, sat down at the small desk she used for the freelance work Robert thought was a waste of her time, opened a new document, titled it Exit Strategy. And for the first time in 5 years, Linda Anderson began to plan something that was entirely unforgivably hers. February came cold and gray the way February always came to Portland. Linda did not tell Robert she knew, did not ask him about the money or the messages or the nights he spent somewhere else. She simply began building. First she called Barbara Kelly. Barbara ran the Children's Reading Foundation, a nonprofit Linda had almost worked with 3 years ago. Barbara had reached out then, asking Linda to rebrand the organization, redesign their materials, help them reach more families. Linda had wanted to say yes. The work mattered. The pay was decent. But Robert had frowned when she mentioned it, said nonprofit work did not pay enough to justify the time commitment, and she had let it go. She picked up the phone on a Tuesday morning while Robert was at work. "Barbara, this is Linda Anderson. I don't know if you remember me, but we talked a few years ago about a rebrand project for the foundation." Barbara's voice brightened immediately. "Linda? Of course I remember. I was so disappointed when you couldn't take it on." "Are you calling because you're reconsidering?" "I'm calling because I'm ready to start, if you're still interested." They met the following week at a coffee shop on Alberta Street. Barbara brought a folder full of ideas. She had been saving layouts. She had sketched herself a wish list of what the foundation could become if they had the right designer. Linda listened, took notes, felt something stir in her chest that she had not felt in a long time. Purpose, direction, the sense that her work could matter to someone other than herself. Barbara offered $8,500 for the first phase. Logo redesign, marketing materials, a new website. Linda shook her hand, signed the contract on the spot. That same week, Linda opened a checking account at a different bank under her maiden name, Linda Parker. She did not tell Robert. Deposited the first payment from Barbara directly into that account. Began transferring every dollar she earned from freelance projects into the same place. Her target was $15,000 in 3 months. Enough to rent an apartment if she needed to. Enough to survive while she figured out what came next. The gym membership came next. Linda had stopped going 2 years ago when Robert made an offhand comment about how she did not need to lose weight. She was fine the way she was. Why was she spending money on something unnecessary? She renewed the membership on a Tuesday, set her alarm for 5:30 in the morning, started showing up at 6 before Robert woke, before he could ask questions she was not ready to answer. She did not go to the gym to look different. She went to feel strong, to inhabit her body in a way that felt solid when everything else felt uncertain. The work with Barbara consumed her in the best possible way. Linda redesigned the foundation's logo first. Bright, bold, approachable. The kind of design that said, "This is a place where children matter, where families are welcome, where literacy is not a test, but a gift." Barbara loved it. Sent it to the board. The board approved it unanimously. Next came the marketing materials, brochures, posters, social media templates. Linda worked late into the night, Robert asleep in the next room, unaware that his wife was building something he would never be part of. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. She had just forgotten. In March, Linda started noticing patterns. Robert's late nights fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Every week, no exceptions. He came home smelling like wine and expensive cologne. Told her he had been at the office working on a pitch, preparing for a meeting. Linda said nothing. She checked his credit card statements once a week now. Watched the charges pile up. Dinners at fancy restaurants. A Cartier bracelet purchase for $8,000. Flowers delivered to an address in the Pearl District. $35,000 in 6 months. Spent on a woman Robert introduced as a colleague. Linda took screenshots. Saved them in a folder titled Receipts, buried 3 levels deep in her laptop's file system. In late March, Linda had to drop off Robert's forgotten wallet at his office. She drove to Davidson Logistics, took the elevator to the 4th floor, walked through the glass doors into the sleek corporate lobby. 2 assistants stood near the coffee station, voices low but not low enough. "Did you see Stephanie Moore's new bracelet? Robert must have spent $8,000 on that thing. I heard she's been dating him for over a year. The wife has no idea." The other assistant laughed, sharp and mean. "The wife. That mousy little thing. She probably doesn't even notice he's gone." Linda stood just outside the break room, wallet in hand, listening. She did not storm in, did not correct them, did not defend herself. She smiled, knocked on the door frame, walked in with the wallet extended. "Hi, sorry to interrupt. Robert forgot this at home." Both assistants turned faces, shifting from casual gossip to forced professionalism in half a second. "Oh, Mrs. Anderson, we'll make sure he gets it." "Thanks so much." Linda's voice stayed warm, pleasant, the voice of a woman who had not just heard herself described as mousy and oblivious. She walked back to her car, sat in the driver's seat, gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. Then she drove to the gym and ran 5 miles without stopping. By April, Linda was ready to build something bigger. She had been thinking about it for weeks. The foundation's rebrand was going well, but it was not enough. Barbara had mentioned in passing that the foundation struggled with capacity. There were waiting lists. Kids who needed help with reading, families who could not afford tutors, schools that were understaffed and overwhelmed. Linda started drafting a proposal. The Story Space, a children's literacy intervention program. 1,200 square feet at the North Portland Community Center. Space for 30 kids ages 6 to 10, primarily from underserved communities. After-school reading support. Creative writing workshops. One-on-one mentorship. She designed the entire program herself. Curriculum framework. Volunteer training materials. Marketing collateral. A budget that came to $85,000 for Phase 1. She worked on it every night for 2 weeks, did not tell Robert, did not ask for his opinion. When it was finished, she sent it to Barbara. Barbara called her the next morning, voice tight with excitement. "Linda, this is extraordinary. I want to send this to Dr. Michael Thompson at the City Library System. He has connections at the Morrison Foundation. They've been looking for exactly this kind of project." "Do it." Linda did not hesitate. 3 days later, Barbara called again. "Thompson wants a meeting, next Thursday. He's very interested." Linda hung up the phone and sat very still. Something was happening, something real, something hers. Robert came home that night at 11, smelled like wine and perfume that was not Linda's, kissed her on the forehead like he always did, asked if she had eaten dinner. "Yeah, I ate." Linda did not look up from her laptop. "What are you working on?" "Just some design stuff for Barbara." Robert nodded, already distracted, already scrolling through his phone. "That's nice. Don't stay up too late." He went to bed. Linda kept working. Meanwhile, Stephanie Moore was getting bolder. In early April, a gift basket arrived at Robert's office. Expensive chocolates, a bottle of scotch, a card that read, "From your biggest fan, S." Robert's assistant mentioned it to Linda when she called to confirm dinner plans. "Oh, and Mr. Anderson got the nicest gift basket today. From a client, I think." Linda thanked her, hung up, stared at the wall. A week later, Robert's phone rang during dinner. He glanced at the screen, frowned, stood up from the table. "I need to take this. Work thing." Linda watched him walk into the next room, heard his voice drop low, heard him say, "Not now, I'll call you back." When he returned to the table, Linda was cutting her chicken into very small pieces. "Everything okay?" Her voice stayed neutral. "Yeah, just a project issue, nothing urgent." Linda nodded, took another bite. Stephanie wanted Robert to go public. That much was clear. The gift baskets, the calls during family time, the pressure. But Robert was not ready. He liked having both. The respectable marriage, the exciting affair, the best of both worlds with none of the consequences. Linda knew this, understood it, let him think he was getting away with it. On April 30th, Robert made his announcement. They were eating dinner, pasta with marinara, salad, garlic bread Linda had made from scratch because Robert said homemade was better than store-bought. The spring charity gala is in 3 weeks. Robert speared a piece of lettuce, chewing while he talked. "Big deal this year. Governor's office is involved. I'll need to be there early." Linda set down her fork. "Are you taking someone?" Robert paused. Just a fraction of a second, not long enough that most people would catch it. But Linda had been watching him for 5 months now. She caught everything. "A few people from work, group thing." Linda nodded slowly. "I see." Robert went back to his pasta. Conversation closed. Linda picked up her fork, set it down again. "I'll see you there then." Robert looked up. "What?" "The gala. I'll be attending. Barbara's organization is being honored this year. She asked me to come as part of the foundation's design team." Linda watched Robert's face, saw the flicker of surprise, the irritation underneath. Oh, that's fine. That works out. He looked back at his plate. Linda could see the gears turning, the calculations, the realization that his carefully separated worlds were about to collide. Yeah, Linda picked up her water glass. It works out. They finished dinner in silence. The next day, Linda called Barbara. The gala. You said the foundation is receiving the Community Impact Award. It's a huge honor. The whole board is going to be there. I want to come, as part of your team, if that's okay. Barbara's voice warmed immediately. Linda, I would love that. Absolutely. You're part of this now. You should be there. Linda exhaled. Good. I'm glad. We're going to make sure you look unforgettable. Barbara's tone shifted, knowing and deliberate. My sister Kathleen does costume design for the local theater. She's going to love dressing you. Linda smiled for the first time in weeks. I'll leave it in her hands. May 10th. Barbara's house. Kathleen waiting with the garment bag draped over the back of the couch. Kathleen was 60, sharp-eyed, with the no-nonsense efficiency of someone who had spent 40 years making actors look like people they were not. She pulled the dress from the bag with a magician's flourish, deep crimson red, floor-length, fitted through the bodice with structured shoulders that suggested authority rather than display, simple in construction but extraordinary in impact. The kind of dress that did not need ornamentation because the color itself was a statement. Linda stared at it. I haven't worn red in years. That's a tragedy we're correcting tonight. Kathleen held the dress up against Linda's frame, studying the way the fabric fell. Try it on. Linda disappeared into Barbara's bedroom, slipped out of her jeans and sweater, pulled the dress over her head, zipped it up, turned to face the mirror. Something happened that she was not entirely prepared for. She recognized herself. Not the careful, quiet version of herself that she had slowly assembled over 5 years of marriage. Not the woman who made herself small to fit into Robert's idea of who she should be. The earlier version. The one who existed before all of this. Before the shrinking. Before the long, slow accommodation of someone else's vision. She looked like herself. Barbara appeared in the doorway, stopped, put a hand over her mouth. Linda. Her voice came out quiet, reverent. My God. Too much. Linda turned from the mirror, suddenly uncertain. Not enough. Not nearly enough. You should have been wearing this your whole life. Linda looked back at the mirror. At the woman in red who stood taller than she remembered standing, who looked like someone worth listening to. When Linda looked in that mirror, she did not see a wife trying to win back her husband. She saw a woman who had finally stopped asking for permission to exist. The grant meeting happened on May 11th. Linda, Barbara, Dr. Michael Thompson, and Margaret Torres from the Morrison Foundation sat around a conference table at the library's administrative offices. Linda presented the story space proposal herself, walked them through the curriculum, the space requirements, the volunteer model, the expected outcomes. Thompson asked hard questions. What about sustainability after the grant period? How would they measure reading improvement? What was the plan for scaling if demand exceeded capacity? Linda answered every question with specifics she had spent weeks researching, funding partnerships with local schools, pre- and post-assessments using standardized literacy benchmarks, a phased expansion model tied to measurable success metrics. Margaret Torres leaned back in her chair, studying Linda with the careful attention of someone who had reviewed hundreds of proposals and could tell within minutes which ones were real. Where does this passion come from? Margaret's voice was direct, not unkind, but probing. Why literacy? Why children? Linda did not rehearse this answer. It came from somewhere deeper. I spent years making myself smaller, quieter, less. I watched what that does to a person, how you start to believe the diminished version is the real one. I don't want any child to arrive at adulthood having already learned that their capacity should be contained to fit someone else's comfort. The room went quiet. Margaret nodded once. Thank you for that honesty. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Handshakes, promises to be in touch soon. Linda walked to her car, sat behind the wheel, let herself breathe. A week later, Barbara called. "They're funding it. Full phase 1, $85,000. Linda had to pull over, could not drive and process this at the same time. "Say that again." Morrison Foundation approved the full grant, $85,000. "The story space is happening, Linda. It's real." Linda sat in her parked car on the side of Hawthorne Boulevard and cried. Not from sadness, not from relief, from the overwhelming recognition that she had just built a future that belonged entirely to her. Robert came home that night and asked how her day was. "Good, fine, busy." He nodded, microwaved leftover pasta, ate it standing at the counter while scrolling through his phone. Linda watched him from the living room. This man who had been her husband for 5 years, who had slowly erased her until she became invisible even to herself. He had no idea what she had just done, no idea what was coming. She smiled, turned back to her laptop, kept working. Stephanie Moore, meanwhile, was making plans of her own. She sat in her Pearl District apartment on May 19th, phone in hand, texting her brother Christopher. "Timeline confirmed. Transfer Saturday night after gala. Flight Sunday 6 a.m. Christopher's response came fast. "Account ready. $180,000 moves clean. You sure about this?" Stephanie looked around her apartment. Expensive furniture, designer clothes, Cartier bracelet on her wrist that Robert had bought her 3 weeks ago. She had done this before, 3 years ago. Different city, different man, different name. It always ended the same way. She got what she came for. They never saw it coming. "I'm sure. He's easy. Wife is a non-issue." Christopher sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Stephanie poured herself a glass of wine, looked out at the city lights, felt the particular satisfaction of a plan coming together exactly as designed. She had looked at Linda Anderson and seen nothing. A housewife. Passive. Irrelevant. That assessment would cost her everything. But she did not know that yet. On May 21st, the night before the gala, Linda took the red dress out of its garment bag, hung it on the back of her bedroom door, sat at her drafting table in the spare room. The room that had been her studio before Robert said the drafting table made the house look cluttered. The room she had reclaimed 3 months ago piece by piece until it was undeniably hers again. She opened her journal, wrote one sentence. "Tomorrow I stop being invisible." Downstairs, Robert was on the phone. Linda could hear his voice through the floor. Low. Intimate. The voice he used when he talked to Stephanie. Linda did not go down to confront him, did not interrupt, did not cry. She closed the journal, turned off the light, went to bed, slept better than she had in months. Morning came gray and cold. Robert left the house at 6 for an early meeting. Linda showered, dressed, drank her coffee standing at the kitchen window. Her phone buzzed. "Barbara." "Ready for tonight?" Linda typed back, "More than ready." At 5 o'clock, Linda drove to Barbara's house. Kathleen was already there, makeup kit spread across the dining room table, curling iron heating on the counter. "Sit," Kathleen pointed to the chair. "We have 2 hours. Let's make them count." By 7 o'clock, Linda Anderson stood in front of Barbara's full-length mirror wearing the crimson-red dress, her hair swept into a loose updo, makeup subtle but transformative. Barbara came up behind her, rested a hand on her shoulder. "You ready for this?" Linda looked at her reflection, at the woman she had been before Robert, at the woman she was becoming again. "I've been ready for 5 months." They drove to the Riverfront Hotel together, pulled up to the valet stand at 7:15. The ballroom doors opened. Stephanie Moore walked in on Robert Anderson's arm draped in ivory and diamonds, certain she was the most important woman in the room. She had no idea that in exactly 12 minutes, everything she thought she knew about power, about control, about Linda Anderson, was about to shatter. Linda stepped out of Barbara's car, smoothed the red dress, walked toward the entrance. The doors opened. She walked through. The ballroom held 200 guests, maybe more. Stephanie stood near the entrance with Robert's arm a comfortable distance from hers, close enough to signal connection, but far enough to maintain the fiction they had arrived separately. The ivory gown she wore cost more than most people spent on rent. She had chosen it specifically for tonight, for the way it caught light, for the way it made her look like someone who belonged in rooms where decisions got made. She surveyed the space with practiced efficiency. Governor's aide at table 7. City council members clustered near the bar. Business leaders she recognized from Portland Business Journal profiles. This was the culmination of 18 months of careful planning. Robert beside her, visible and viable. Her standing in a room that mattered, wearing jewelry he had paid for, playing a role she had perfected over years of practice. The moment felt complete. Satisfying in the way moments feel satisfying when you have orchestrated every detail. Then the doors opened again. Barbara Kelly entered first, laughing at something one of her colleagues said. 3 other women from the Reading Foundation followed their conversation, animated and genuine, and among them, moving with an ease that seemed to require no effort at all, walked Linda Anderson in a dress the color of blood. Not dramatic, not announced, simply present. The shift in the room was not loud. No gasps, no sudden silence. Just a subtle reorientation of attention, the way a compass needle moves when the magnetic field changes. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. The mayor's wife leaned toward her husband, whispering something behind her hand. Stephanie felt it before she saw it. The pull of focus away from her toward something else. Someone else. She followed the sight line. Linda Anderson stood 20 feet away, greeting a cluster of guests near the foundation's display table. Dr. Michael Thompson had crossed the room to shake her hand, holding the contact longer than professional courtesy required, his face warm with genuine pleasure. The Chamber of Commerce president joined the conversation, leaning in to hear what Linda was saying. Janet Price from the city council moved closer, nodding at something Linda explained. This was not the woman Stephanie had catalogued in her mind. Not the mousy housewife Robert had described with casual dismissal over dinners and late-night phone calls. Not the woman who stayed home and did small design projects and made herself invisible at corporate events. The woman in the red dress commanded the space around her without apparent effort. Moved through conversation with the fluid confidence of someone who knew her worth and did not need anyone else to confirm it. Stephanie's champagne glass became very important to hold. She gripped the stem tighter than necessary, working to keep her face neutral. Beside her, Robert had gone completely still. "Robert." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. He did not respond, did not even turn his head. His eyes stayed locked on his wife across the room. "Robert." Harder now, insistent. He blinked, turned slowly like someone waking from a dream they did not want to leave. "Sorry." "What?" Stephanie studied his face, saw something there she had not seen before, something that felt dangerous. "Nothing. Never mind." Robert's attention drifted back toward Linda. He caught himself, forced his eyes back to Stephanie. But the damage was already done. The crack was already visible. Stephanie understood in that moment what she had failed to understand for 18 months. She had made an error in assessment. She had looked at Linda Anderson and seen weakness where there was actually foundation. Absence where there was simply patience. The woman across the room was not fading. She was blooming. Robert Anderson did not recognize his wife for the first 3 seconds. His brain could not reconcile the woman he had left at home that morning with the woman standing in a circle of city officials laughing at something the deputy director said. Then recognition hit like cold water. Linda. His wife. But not his wife. Not the Linda who moved through their house like a ghost, who spoke in half sentences, when she spoke at all, who had become so thoroughly invisible that he sometimes forgot she was in the room. This was someone else. Someone from before. From the beginning. From the night they met, when she wore a red shirt and her laugh filled the entire bar, and he thought she was the most alive person he had ever seen. When had she stopped laughing like that? The question arrived with uncomfortable clarity. He knew the answer. He had made her stop. Not all at once. Not with cruelty or violence or anything he could point to and call abuse. Just slow erosion. Tiny cuts. Small adjustments that accumulated over 5 years until the woman he married had been replaced by someone quieter, smaller, easier to ignore. Robert watched Linda tilt her head back, laughing at something Janet Price said. That gesture. He remembered that gesture. From their engagement party. From early mornings in their first apartment when everything was still new and she still looked at him like he was someone worth impressing. When had she stopped doing that? He already knew. He had stopped deserving it. The realization came with weight. Physical weight, like stones piling on his chest. He had been given something rare and he had looked at it every day and decided it was not enough. Had compared it to surfaces and found it lacking because he had been measuring the wrong things entirely. Linda stood at the center of a conversation now, 4 people gathered around her, all of them leaning in to hear what she was saying. She gestured with her hands, explaining something, and they nodded, genuinely engaged. She was not performing, not trying to be impressive. She simply was. Robert's hands tightened around his drink. He felt something he had not felt in years. Not jealousy, though, that was there too. Something deeper. Recognition of loss. The particular grief of understanding you destroyed something irreplaceable and only noticed when it started thriving without you. Stephanie's hand found his arm. He felt the pressure of her fingers through his jacket sleeve. Let's find the governor's aide. You wanted an introduction. Robert heard the words, but they felt distant, unimportant. In a minute. Stephanie's fingers tightened. Robert. He looked at her finally, saw something in her face that he had not seen before. Uncertainty. Worry masked as irritation. I'm fine. Just give me a minute. He pulled away from her touch, moved toward the bar. Needed space to think. Needed distance from the careful performance they had been maintaining for 18 months. Behind him, Stephanie stood alone in her ivory dress, watching her careful plans begin to crack. The dinner seating arrangement was not accidental. Reading foundation table, front and center. 8 guests, including Linda, positioned with clear sightline to the stage where Barbara would speak later. Robert's company table 12 feet to the left, slightly offset. 10 guests, including Stephanie. Close enough to see everything. Far enough to feel the separation. Linda took her seat beside Sharon Miller, a retired teacher who had volunteered with the foundation for 4 years. Sharon had opinions about everything and delivered them with the warm authority of someone who had spent 35 years teaching 2nd grade. Have you been to one of these before? Sharon adjusted her reading glasses, squinting at the menu card. No, this is my first. They always do chicken or salmon, never anything interesting. But the wine is decent and the company is better. Sharon smiled, genuine and immediate. Barbara told me you're the one who redesigned everything. The new materials are beautiful, actually make people want to read them. Linda felt warmth spread through her chest. That means a lot. Thank you. They fell into easy conversation about reading levels and childhood literacy and the specific ways underfunded schools failed the kids who needed help most. Linda found herself genuinely engaged, asking questions she actually wanted answers to, contributing ideas that Sharon responded to with enthusiasm. She had not looked at Robert's table once. She did not need to. She could feel his attention from across the room, could sense the weight of his gaze the way you sense someone watching you in a crowded place. Let him watch. At the company table, Stephanie sat with Robert's hand resting near hers on the white tablecloth, close but not touching. The performance of intimacy without actual contact. She watched Linda laugh at something Sharon said, watched the ease of it, the comfort, the complete absence of self-consciousness. Stephanie had spent 18 months building a very specific image of Linda Anderson, passive, domestic, unambitious, a woman who had settled into irrelevance and did not have the strength or vision to climb out. Everything she was watching now contradicted that assessment. The woman at the foundation table did not look passive. She looked engaged, interested, present in a way that drew people toward her rather than requiring her to push for attention. Stephanie's phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out under the table. Text from Christopher. Still on for 11 p.m. transfer. Stephanie typed back quickly. Yes, ready on your end. All set. Flight confirmed 6 a.m. She put the phone away. Let her breathing steady. The plan was solid. Christopher had set up the shell accounts months ago. The transfers would go through clean. By Sunday morning she would be in Vancouver with $180,000 and a new identity already established. Robert was a means to an end, always had been. The fact that he was currently staring at his wife with regret did not change the fundamental math. Stephanie lifted her champagne glass, took a long drink, reminded herself that she had done this before and it had worked perfectly. 3 years ago, different city, different man, same outcome. This would be no different, except it already was. She just did not know it yet. 8 o'clock. The program began. The MC was the governor's chief of staff, a polished woman in her 50s who knew how to work a microphone and keep a program moving. She welcomed the guests, thanked the sponsors, introduced the first award: community development, infrastructure innovation, economic impact. The third award was community impact, the Reading Foundation. Barbara walked to the stage with the poised confidence of someone who had given hundreds of presentations and knew exactly how to hold a room's attention. She spoke about literacy rates, about the 40% of third graders in Portland who read below grade level, about the correlation between early reading failure and long-term outcomes, about the Foundation's work to close that gap before it became permanent. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something true is being said. Then Barbara shifted. Her voice warmed. I also want to recognize someone whose work has transformed our foundation this year. Her design has given us a new visual identity, but more importantly, her vision has given us a new program. Linda's hand stilled in her lap. The Story Space is our children's literacy intervention program. It launches next month thanks to a generous grant from the Morrison Foundation. We'll be serving 30 children in our first cohort, providing after-school reading support, creative writing workshops, and mentorship from trained volunteers. Barbara paused. Let the information settle. This program exists because one person saw a need and refused to accept that need as inevitable. Please join me in recognizing our lead designer and program architect, Linda Anderson. The applause started immediate and generous. Not polite golf claps, but genuine appreciation from 200 people who understood what it meant to build something that mattered. Linda stood, nodded to the room, smiled without performance or artifice, sat back down. The applause continued for another 5 seconds before fading. At the company table, Robert was clapping. His hands moved mechanically while his brain tried to process what he had just heard. Linda had built this. The entire program, secured an $85,000 grant, created something real and substantial and lasting. While he had been at dinners with Stephanie, while he had been spending money he did not have on jewelry and trips and the maintenance of an affair that now felt hollow and vaguely ridiculous, his wife had been building a future. His face must have shown something because the colleague next to him leaned over. "You okay, man?" "Yeah, fine. Just surprised. Didn't know Linda was this involved." The colleague nodded, went back to his salmon. Robert looked at his plate, could not remember if he had eaten anything. At the foundation table, Sharon squeezed Linda's hand. "That was wonderful. You must be so proud." Linda looked at her hands, at the work they had done, at the future they had built without asking permission from anyone. "I am." Across the room, Stephanie's hands rested in her lap, flat against the white napkin, not clapping. She worked very hard to keep her face neutral, to maintain the mask of someone unbothered and secure. The effort was visible only to someone watching closely. Robert was watching closely. He saw it, saw the tightness around her mouth, the deliberate stillness of her posture, the way she stared at the tablecloth like it held answers she needed. Something shifted in him, not large, not dramatic, just a door closing somewhere deep in his chest. A recognition that he had made a series of catastrophically stupid choices and was only now beginning to understand the full scope of the damage. The program ended 20 minutes later. The room opened back up into the easy circulation of a gala in its middle hours. People moving between tables, collecting dessert from the buffet, forming clusters in the hallways. Robert stood up. His body moved without consulting his brain. "I need some air." Stephanie looked up at him. "I'll come with you." "I need a minute alone." Her eyes narrowed. Something passed between them. Not quite an argument, not quite a question, but something that had the shape of a reckoning postponed. Fine. Robert walked toward the side exit that led to a terrace overlooking the Willamette River, pushed through the door into cool night air that felt sharp in his lungs. He stood at the railing, looked at nothing in particular, tried to organize his thoughts into something coherent. Behind him the door opened again. He thought it was Stephanie, turned already forming an excuse for why he needed more time. It was Linda. She stopped when she saw him. A small pause before her expression arranged itself into something composed and careful. "I didn't know you were out here." Robert's throat went tight. "I needed air." Linda moved to the far side of the terrace, kept distance between them, looked out at the river the way he had been looking at it. For 30 seconds neither of them spoke. Robert broke first. "Barbara's event, the program, it's impressive." Linda turned her head slightly, not looking at him, just acknowledging he had spoken. "Thank you. I didn't know you were working on something this big." "You didn't ask." The words landed clean. No anger, no accusation, just fact. Robert deserved that. Knew he deserved worse. "Linda, I think we need to talk about—" She cut him off. Not unkindly, just firmly. "Robert, not tonight." Her voice carried something he had not heard in years. Finality. The kind of finality that does not negotiate or compromise. He tried again. "When?" Linda looked at him fully now, her eyes clear and direct. "I don't know yet, but not tonight. Tonight isn't about you." She walked back toward the door, stopped with her hand on the handle. "Enjoy the rest of the gala." Then she was gone. Robert stood alone on the terrace for a long time after that. The river moved below. The city lights reflected on dark water. Inside, the party continued without him. He had just been dismissed by his own wife. Politely, calmly, completely. It felt like the most honest thing that had happened between them in years. Inside the ballroom, Stephanie had moved, no longer at the company table. She stood near the coat check, scrolling through her phone with the focused attention of someone making decisions. Text to Christopher. Change of plans, move up the timeline, go now. 3 dots appeared. Then, now you said 11 p.m. Situation changed, do it now, don't wait. Confirmed, initiating transfers. Stephanie watched the screen, waited for the confirmation she knew would come. 30 seconds, 45, 1 minute. Her phone buzzed. Transfer sequence complete. $180,000 received. Account 7392. Stephanie screenshotted the message, deleted the thread, cleared her recent calls, looked up at the ballroom one more time. Linda Anderson stood at the foundation table talking to Sharon and 2 other volunteers, laughing about something, completely absorbed in her conversation, completely unbothered by anything happening outside her immediate circle. Stephanie felt something she did not want to name. Not jealousy exactly, something colder. The recognition that she had misread the entire situation from the beginning. She had thought Linda Anderson was weak, fragile, easy to dismiss. She understood now that dismissing someone and making them irrelevant were 2 entirely different things. Linda Anderson had never been irrelevant. She had just been quiet. And quiet Stephanie was learning too late was not the same as defeated. Stephanie picked up her coat from the check, walked toward the exit, did not say goodbye to Robert, did not look back at the ballroom. By the time anyone noticed she was gone, she would be 20 minutes away. At 8:50, Linda stood at the bar getting a glass of water when Stephanie appeared beside her. Linda Anderson, Wright Robert's wife. Linda turned, looked at Stephanie Moore for the first time all evening. Up close, she was exactly what Linda expected. Polished, put together. The kind of beautiful that requires significant investment and careful maintenance. "Yes, and you're Stephanie Moore." Stephanie's smile held. "We met briefly, 2 years ago, company event." "I remember." The air between them felt charged, not hostile, just aware. 2 women who knew exactly what they were to each other, pretending they did not. Stephanie shifted her weight. "Your work with the foundation, it's impressive. Barbara spoke very highly of you." The work speaks for itself. Robert must be proud. Linda took a sip of water. Let the silence stretch. Stephanie tried again. Must be difficult sometimes, being married to someone so driven, always at the office. The smirk was slight, almost invisible. But Linda saw it. She set down her water glass, looked Stephanie directly in the eyes. Stephanie, I'm going to say this once. Whatever you think you have with Robert, enjoy it while it lasts. Because in about 6 months you'll understand exactly what I understood 5 years in. He doesn't see women. He sees mirrors, and mirrors break. Linda picked up her glass, walked away, did not look back. Stephanie stood at the bar, champagne frozen halfway to her lips. Her composure cracked just slightly, just enough for her to feel the full impact of what had just happened. Linda Anderson had dismissed her, cleanly, definitively, without anger or emotion. That was worse than anger. Anger meant Linda still cared. Dismissal meant she had already moved on. Stephanie finished her champagne in one long swallow, set the glass on the bar harder than necessary. She needed to leave, now, before anything else went wrong. 9:47. Robert sat in a bathroom stall checking his phone because he could not stand being at the table with Stephanie's careful performance and his colleagues' oblivious chatter. Banking app notification. High-value transaction alert. Unusual account activity detected. Please verify immediately. His stomach dropped. He opened the app, watched the numbers load. Personal investment account, -$75,000. Joint savings, -$65,000. Checking -$40,000. Total $180,000. Gone. Transaction time 8:43 p.m. 64 minutes ago. Robert's hands started shaking. He opened the transaction details. All 3 transfers authorized with his login credentials, routed to account numbers he did not recognize. Banks he had never used. He called the fraud line, hands trembling so badly he almost dropped the phone. The specialist who answered was named David Martinez, professional, calm, probably dealt with panicked customers all day. Mr. Anderson, I'm looking at your account now. I see the flagged transactions. They weren't me. I didn't authorize those transfers. The system shows they were authorized from your devices using your login credentials. Do you recognize the destination account numbers? No, none of them. Have you shared your banking credentials with anyone, given anyone access to your devices? Robert closed his eyes, saw himself handing Stephanie his laptop password 4 months ago so she could check her email while visiting, saw his phone sitting on the counter while he showered, saw every casual moment of trust that had just been weaponized against him. Oh God, David's voice stayed steady. Mr. Anderson, I'm flagging these transactions for fraud investigation, but I need to be direct with you. If credentials were shared voluntarily, recovery becomes significantly more difficult. The bank will do everything possible, but I want to manage your expectations. How much can I get back? That's impossible to say at this stage. It depends on where the money went, how quickly we can freeze accounts, whether the receiving institution cooperates. We'll try, but you should contact law enforcement tonight. Robert thanked him, ended the call. Sat on a toilet in a hotel bathroom staring at his phone screen showing -$180,000. Then he stood up, washed his hands with water so cold it burned, looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a man who had just understood the full scope of his own stupidity. He ran through the hotel, checked the ballroom, the coat check, asked the valet about a woman in an ivory dress. Left about 20 minutes ago, sir. Took an Uber. Robert called Stephanie's phone, straight to voicemail. Called again, same result. Texted, "Where are you? Call me now." Message delivered. No response. He knew her apartment address, the Pearl District high-rise where he had spent Tuesday and Thursday nights for the past year. He got in his car, drove faster than he should have, parked illegally. The doorman recognized him. "Mr. Anderson, Ms. Moore isn't here." "What do you mean she's not here?" "She left about 2 hours ago. Had luggage with her. Told me she'd be gone for a while." "Where did she go?" "Airport shuttle, sir. That's all I know." Robert stood in the lobby of a building he had visited dozens of times, felt the floor tilt underneath him. $180,000. Gone. Stephanie gone. Everything calculated from the beginning. He got back in his car, drove to the police station, felt numb the entire way. Portland Police Financial Crimes Unit. Saturday night meant a skeleton crew, but they took fraud reports around the clock. The detective who took his statement was named Amanda Garcia. Mid-40s. Efficient. She had probably heard this exact story 20 times this month. Robert explained everything. The 18-month relationship, the voluntary sharing of passwords, the discovery tonight, the realization that he had been targeted from the start. Garcia typed steadily, asked clarifying questions, did not judge or comment. "We'll investigate Mr. Anderson, but I'm going to be honest with you. Voluntary credential sharing complicates recovery significantly. We'll check airports, train stations, border crossings. But if she planned this well, and it sounds like she did, she probably had multiple exit strategies." "So you're saying I'm not getting the money back?" "I'm saying it's going to be difficult. We'll do everything we can." Garcia looked at him directly. "Does your wife know about the relationship?" Robert's throat tightened. "Yes, she knows. We may need to speak with her. Verify timeline. Confirm details about access to your accounts. She'll cooperate with anything you need." Garcia nodded, handed him a case number, told him someone would be in touch Monday morning. Robert sat in the police station parking lot at 11:17 and understood three things with absolute clarity. He had been a fool. He had lost $180,000. And the woman he should have been protecting was the one he had spent 5 years destroying. His phone buzzed. Text from Linda. "Are you home? We need to talk." Robert stared at the message, started the car, drove home. Linda arrived first. Barbara had dropped her off at 11:30. She entered the quiet house, hung the red dress carefully in her closet, changed into comfortable clothes, sat at her drafting table in the spare room, opened her laptop, started a new document, Story Space Phase 2 expansion proposal, worked for 90 minutes. Did not think about Robert, did not think about Stephanie, just focused on the next step, the next goal. The sound of Robert's car in the driveway came at 1:50 in the morning. She heard him enter, heard him stop in the entryway, heard the long pause that meant he was trying to decide what to do next. His footsteps moved toward the spare room, stopped outside the door where light spilled through the gap. Knock, gentle. "Linda, come in." He opened the door, stood in the frame, looked destroyed, suit wrinkled, tie gone, face drawn with exhaustion and something worse than exhaustion. He did not sit, just stood there, shoulders sagging under weight he could not quite carry. "I need to tell you something." Linda closed her laptop, turned to face him. "Okay," Robert told her, haltingly, with long pauses where he had to force himself to continue. The $180,000, the banking alert, Stephanie's disappearance, the police report, the detective's warning that recovery was unlikely. Linda listened without interrupting. Her face stayed neutral, processing information without showing the calculation happening behind her eyes. When he finished, she asked only one question. "How much can you recover?" "They don't know. Maybe half, maybe less." Silence filled the space between them. Linda stood, faced him fully. "You gave her access to the accounts." Robert's voice came out small. "Yes." "Voluntarily?" "Yes." Linda took a breath, let it out slowly. "Robert, I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear all of it." He nodded. "I know what happened to you tonight. You were targeted by someone skilled at deception. I have sympathy for that. Being deceived hurts." She paused. "But the reason you were vulnerable wasn't Stephanie's skill. It was the choices you made in this marriage, the way you treated me, the comparisons, the dismissals, the slow erosion of who I was until I became someone I didn't recognize." Robert's eyes went red. He did not cry, just stood there absorbing impact. "Stephanie didn't create those conditions. You did." Another pause. "I'm not telling you this to punish you. I'm telling you because I'm done having half conversations. You chose repeatedly to look elsewhere for what you had at home, and I chose repeatedly to shrink rather than confront that. We both have things to own." Robert's voice came out barely above whisper. "I know." Linda continued, relentless now in her honesty. "I don't know what this marriage looks like from here. I don't know if it's repairable or if I even want to repair it, but I know I'm not answering that question from fear or habit." She gestured to the room around them. The drafting table, the materials for story space, the evidence of a life she had built without him. "I have work that matters, people who respect it, a project that's real, a version of my life that I built while you were looking at someone else." Robert nodded slowly, like someone accepting a sentence they knew they deserved. "So, if you want an honest conversation about what comes next, I'm here for that. But it will be honest all the way through, no more pretending." The room held both of them in silence for a long moment. Finally, Robert spoke. "I don't deserve anything from you. I know that." He stopped, started again. "But I need you to know, tonight, watching you in that room, I was a fool. About everything. About you for years." Linda looked at him, really looked, saw genuine remorse, also saw that remorse alone was not enough to rebuild what had been broken. "I know you were. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement." Robert's voice cracked. "Is there any version of forward that includes both of us?" Linda looked at her drafting table, at the work spread across it, at the future she had designed without consulting him. "Robert, I'm going to be honest. Right now, no. I don't see that version." She let that land before continuing. "Maybe that changes. Maybe after you do real work on yourself, not for me but for yourself, maybe then we have a different conversation. But tonight, no." Robert nodded, accepted it. "You should sleep in the guest room. We'll talk more this week." "Okay." He turned to leave, stopped at the door. "The program you built, Story Space, it's extraordinary." Linda did not respond, just looked at him until he left and closed the door behind him. She sat back down at her drafting table, did not cry, did not feel triumph or satisfaction or relief, just breathed, let the evening settle into her bones, returned to her work. Outside dawn was beginning to break over Portland. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold. Linda was still at her desk. Phase 2 proposal nearly complete. Robert lay awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling, understanding with brutal clarity that he had destroyed the best thing he had ever had. Stephanie's phone, turned off hours ago, sat in a rental car heading north on Interstate 5 toward the Canadian border. Detective Garcia sat at her desk in the Financial Crimes Unit, beginning the investigation that would consume her next 2 weeks. By sunrise, 3 people's lives had fundamentally changed. Robert Anderson knew he had lost everything that mattered. Stephanie Moore believed she had escaped clean, and Linda Anderson had finally completely come home to herself. But the story was not over, not yet, because Stephanie Moore had made one more miscalculation, and it was about to cost her everything. Monday morning arrived with rain that turned Portland's streets slick and gray. Linda's phone rang at 8 while she was making coffee, the number unfamiliar but local. "Mrs. Anderson, this is Detective Amanda Garcia with Portland Police Financial Crimes Unit. I'm investigating a case involving your husband. Do you have time to talk?" Linda set down her mug. "I assumed you'd call. What do you need?" Garcia asked about timeline. When Linda first discovered the affair, whether Stephanie had contacted her directly, whether Linda noticed financial irregularities in their accounts. Linda answered each question with clarity that came from 5 months of careful observation. She had seen Robert move money, had screenshots of transactions saved in encrypted folders, had dates and amounts memorized. Garcia's voice shifted, impressed despite professional neutrality. "You're very prepared, Mrs. Anderson." "I've had 5 months to process what's happening. The theft doesn't surprise me." Garcia paused. "There's something else we found. Secondary phone registered to Stephanie Moore. Messages suggest she'd been tracking you, your movements, your schedule, going back about 4 months." Linda's hand tightened on the phone. "Tracking me how?" photos of your car at various locations, messages discussing where you work when you're home, who you spend time with. Some information appears to have come from your husband. Some we're still sourcing. Linda processed this. Woman who called her nobody had spent 4 months documenting her existence. Was I in danger? We have no evidence of physical threat, but I'd like you to come to the station this afternoon. 2 o'clock I can show you what we have. I'll be there. Linda ended the call, stood in her kitchen holding cold coffee, felt violated in a way she had not anticipated. Being dismissed was one thing, being surveilled was something else entirely. She drove to the police station at 1:45. Garcia met her in a conference room with manila folders spread across the table. The detective was younger than Linda expected. Early 40s, dark hair, pulled back eyes that had seen enough financial crime to recognize patterns before victims did. Garcia opened the first folder. Printed messages from Stephanie's secondary phone. Text to Christopher. Wife works from home Tuesdays and Thursdays. Leaves for gym 6 a.m. sharp. Another, meeting foundation people at coffee shop Alberta Street Wednesdays 10 a.m. Another, wife more active lately. Started working again. Need to verify she doesn't suspect. Linda read them twice. Her own life reduced to surveillance notes in someone else's criminal enterprise. Garcia opened the second folder. Photographs. Linda's car outside New Seasons Market. Timestamp. March 15th. Linda entering the gym. March 22nd. Linda at the coffee shop with Barbara. April 3rd. Linda walking toward the community center. April 12th. All taken from distance. All clearly documenting her movements without her knowledge. I never felt followed. Garcia nodded. Most people don't. She was good at this. The detective pulled out another document. There's more. We found a case file from 3 years ago. Seattle Police Department. Same pattern. She slid a police report across the table. Victim Brian Harris, 41 technology consultant, lost $95,000. Suspect woman using alias Nicole Stevens. Case closed when victim declined to prosecute. Photo attached. Nicole Stevens was Stephanie Moore. She's done this before. At least once. We're checking other jurisdictions now. Garcia leaned back in her chair. Seattle victim had a wife, Jessica Harris. They divorced after the incident. I contacted her yesterday. She's willing to testify if we locate Stephanie. Linda absorbed this. Another wife, another marriage destroyed, another woman who survived what Linda was surviving now. You said if you locate her, you don't know where she is? Garcia's expression tightened with frustration. Flight manifests show no Stephanie Moore departing Sunday morning. She either used an alias or left by car. We're checking border crossings, but she had 18 hours head start. Professional criminals know how to disappear. Do you think you'll find her? Eventually, but I can't promise when. Linda drove home processing layers of violation. The affair had been painful. The theft had been criminal. But the tracking felt different, more invasive. Stephanie had looked at Linda and seen someone worth monitoring, worth documenting, worth fearing. That last thought landed with unexpected weight. Stephanie had been afraid of her, not the other way around. The woman who called Linda nobody had spent months unable to stop watching her, had needed to catalog and track and verify because somewhere deep in her criminal calculations, Linda represented a threat. The woman who truly believed Linda was irrelevant would not have wasted 4 months photographing her. Wednesday afternoon, Linda called the number Garcia had provided. Mrs. Harris, my name is Linda Anderson. Detective Garcia gave me your contact information. Jessica Harris's voice came through careful and measured. I've been expecting someone to call. They talked for 40 minutes. Jessica told her story in clean sentences that suggested she had processed this trauma into something manageable. Married Brian for 8 years. He met Nicole at a conference. 14-month affair. $95,000 stolen. Brian too ashamed to prosecute. Marriage dissolved under the weight of betrayal and humiliation. The worst part wasn't losing the money. It was watching him choose embarrassment over justice. His ego couldn't handle being the victim. Linda recognized that pattern. Robert almost made the same choice, but the amount was bigger, harder to hide from himself. How are you handling it? Linda thought about the question genuinely. Better than I expected, because I started building an exit 5 months ago. When everything collapsed, I was already standing on different ground. Jessica's voice warmed with something like admiration. I wish I'd had that foresight. I waited for Brian to fix things. He never could. Linda mentioned Story Space, the literacy program, the grant. Jessica's response came fast and surprised. Wait, you're building a children's literacy program, launching in 2 weeks. Linda, I'm a first-grade teacher, 16 years in Seattle public schools. The silence that followed felt significant. Linda spoke carefully. We have funding and space. What we don't have yet is someone with actual classroom experience. Would you consider consulting on the program? You're asking me to work with you. Stephanie tried to destroy both of us. We can let that be the story, or we can build something that matters more. Which do you choose? Jessica's voice shifted, emotion breaking through professional composure. When can I start? They scheduled a video call for Friday. Linda hung up feeling something unexpected. Not just solidarity with another survivor. Genuine excitement about collaboration. Stephanie Moore had connected them. But they were choosing what to build from that connection. Friday's video call lasted 90 minutes. Jessica reviewed Linda's curriculum framework with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years watching children struggle with reading. She made suggestions grounded in classroom reality, which tactile materials actually helped versus which just looked good in proposals. How to structure sessions so kids didn't feel tested. Ways to involve parents without overwhelming them. Barbara joined for the last 20 minutes, left impressed. By the end of the call, Jessica was official education consultant for Story Space. She would visit Portland for the launch, help train volunteers, bring expertise. Linda and Barbara lacked. Linda closed her laptop, feeling the particular satisfaction of finding the right person for work that mattered. Wednesday of the second week, Garcia called with news. We found her, or we're about to. Linda's pulse jumped. Where? Garcia explained. Christopher Moore had gotten careless, used one of the shell accounts to pay for a hotel room in Vancouver. Transaction flagged due to unusual activity. Hotel records showed reservation under his real name plus guest. Royal Pacific Hotel, downtown Vancouver. She's been there 10 days. When are you arresting her? FBI's coordinating with Canadian authorities. Extradition takes time, but she'll be in custody by Friday. Linda thanked her, set down the phone, felt something that was not quite relief, not quite satisfaction. Just the recognition that consequences were arriving at their proper destination. Friday morning, 6 a.m. Pacific time. Stephanie Moore woke in a hotel suite overlooking Vancouver Harbor. 10 days of safety. $180,000 secured in an account Christopher promised was untraceable. Plans forming for Costa Rica. For a new identity. For the next chapter that always came after the theft. She had done this before. It always worked. 7:30. Knock on the door. Stephanie assumed room service. Opened without checking. 4 people stood in the hallway. 2 Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers. 1 FBI agent whose badge read Kenneth Wright. Detective Amanda Garcia from Portland. Wright spoke with bureaucratic efficiency. Stephanie Moore, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and interstate financial crimes. Stephanie's composure held for exactly 2 seconds, then cracked, then rebuilt itself into something harder. I think you have the wrong person. Wright pulled out a tablet. We have your secondary phone, your brother's laptop with all coordination emails, bank records showing the exact transaction flow. Christopher gave a full statement 2 hours ago, confirmed you as the architect. Christopher had flipped. The handcuffs felt cold. The walk through the hotel lobby felt long. Guests stared. Stephanie kept her face neutral, training overriding panic. In the police vehicle she did not speak, just calculated. Good lawyer could argue coercion, could claim Christopher acted alone, could create reasonable doubt. Except they had the laptop, FBI field office downtown Vancouver. Agent Wright laid out evidence with methodical precision. Christopher's laptop contained everything. Email drafts coordinating the entire operation, spreadsheets tracking Robert's account balances week by week, photos Stephanie had sent showing Robert's credit cards, banking passwords, account numbers, messages between siblings. Target is wealthy enough and stupid enough. Perfect mark. Wright watched her face while she read. Your brother gave us everything in under 20 minutes. Said you planned the whole thing. Said he just provided technical support. Stephanie's lawyer voice activated. I want representation. You'll get it. But Ms. Moore, we also have the Seattle case. Brian Harris's ex-wife, Jessica, is testifying. Pattern of behavior across state lines. Federal charges. You're looking at 15 to 20 years. Stephanie's face went white despite her best efforts. The extradition hearing happened Monday. Stephanie's lawyer advised not fighting it. Delays were expensive, and inevitable outcome was the same. She waived extradition. Was transported back to Portland on Tuesday. Booked at Multnomah County Detention Center. Bail set at $500,000. She could not make it. The money she had stolen was frozen. Christopher was cooperating with prosecutors. Her parents had disowned her after Seattle. She sat in a cell and felt walls closing for the first time in her career. News coverage was minimal. Portland woman arrested in fraud scheme. Victim's name withheld. But the story spread through social circles anyway. People who had seen Stephanie at the gala, who had watched her on Robert's arm, who were now recalculating everything they thought they knew. 3 weeks after the gala, story space opened. North Portland Community Center. 1,200 square feet transformed by Linda's vision and Barbara's determination and Margaret Torres's funding. Bright paint on walls. Bookshelves at child height. Reading nooks with cushions. Natural light through windows Linda had insisted on extending. 30 children registered, ages 6 to 10, mix of backgrounds and reading levels, and the particular combination of hope and wariness that kids brought when adults promised to help. First session, Tuesday 3:30 p.m. Nancy Davis, the program coordinator Linda had hired, led the session with practiced warmth. Barbara circulated. Linda observed from a corner with her notepad, watching how children moved through the space she had designed for them. Tyler arrived holding his mother's hand, 9 years old. Intake note said resistant, disengaged reading, 2 years below grade level. He stood in the doorway scanning the room like he was checking for danger. Then he saw the book corner. Low shelves accessible without asking permission. Covers facing out so kids could see what they were choosing. Tyler walked over, picked up an illustrated book about space, held it carefully, sat down on a floor cushion in the reading nook. Did not open it immediately, just turned it over in his hands, checking whether this thing was safe, whether this place was safe. Linda watched him, wrote in her notebook, felt something expand in her chest that had no name except purpose. By the end of 90 minutes, Tyler had asked Nancy to read part of the book to him. 2 other kids had joined. By the time his mother came to pick him up, Tyler was smiling. His mother's eyes were wet. He never smiles about reading. Never. Linda watched them leave. Thought about the grant proposal she had written at 2 in the morning while Robert slept in the guest room. About the hours of design work. About the risk of building something that might fail. It was not failing. Barbara found her after the session ended. Did you see Tyler's face? I saw it. Barbara's voice went thick. You built this, Linda. You actually built it. Linda looked around the room. Her design, her vision, her stubborn insistence on creating something that mattered when everyone else assumed she was doing nothing, not given to her by anyone, not contingent on recognition or approval. Purpose that came from herself, existed through herself, belonged entirely to herself. Jessica arrived from Seattle that weekend, spent Saturday observing the program, brought curriculum modifications based on what she saw, trained volunteers on reading intervention strategies that actually worked versus strategies that just sounded good in academic papers. Saturday evening, Linda and Jessica had dinner at a restaurant on Hawthorne. Jessica asked the question Linda had been expecting. Are you staying with Robert? Linda considered her wine glass. We're in counseling, individual sessions, starting joint sessions next week, but I'm not deciding from need. I'm deciding from choice. That's the difference. Jessica's voice carried weight of experience. I needed Brian. You don't need Robert. No, I don't. And maybe that's the only foundation something real could be rebuilt on. Or maybe it means I'm ready to walk away. I'm okay with both possibilities. Jessica studied her. You're stronger than I was. I had 5 months head start to build scaffolding. You can build it too. It's not too late. They talked until the restaurant closed, about teaching, about literacy, about what it meant to survive something designed to destroy you and choose to build anyway. 6 months after the gala, October arrived with falling leaves and cooling temperatures. Stephanie's trial concluded with a plea deal. Federal wire fraud. 8 years. Restitution ordered for $180,000 plus damages. Christopher got 5 years for cooperation. The sentencing hearing was public. Linda attended. Not for vengeance, not for closure in the dramatic sense, just to witness consequence arriving at its proper destination. The judge was a woman in her 60s who had seen too many fraud cases to have patience for this one. Ms. Moore, you targeted vulnerable people with calculated cruelty. You damaged families, destroyed trust, and showed no remorse until you were caught. This sentence reflects the severity of your crimes and the pattern of behavior you established across multiple jurisdictions. Stephanie was led away in handcuffs. Looked at Linda once across the courtroom. Linda's face showed nothing. No triumph, no anger, just the neutral observation of someone watching a transaction complete. Outside the courthouse, Garcia found her. How are you doing? Linda thought about it. Better than I expected. The program you built. I read about it in the Oregonian. Sounds like it's making a real difference. 60 kids enrolled now, waiting list of 40. We're expanding in January. Garcia smiled, genuine and warm. Good for you. Robert's recovery was slower. Financial through asset seizure and bank cooperation. 95,000 of the 180,000 was recovered. 85,000 lost permanently. His savings account showed the scar. Would continue showing it for years. Personal individual therapy twice a week with Dr. Timothy Walker. Working through why he needed external validation. Why he had dismissed Linda. How his sense of worth had become tangled with achievement and perception. The work was hard, uncomfortable, necessary. Marriage counseling with Dr. Rebecca Clark started in June. She was 60. Blunt, unwilling to let either of them hide behind comfortable narratives. Progress came in small increments. Robert moved back to the master bedroom in September. Physical intimacy remained distant. Trust rebuilt slowly, tested, constantly fragile in ways it had not been before. Month 6 October. Session with Dr. Clark. Linda spoke first. The thing she had been thinking about for weeks. Robert, I need to tell you something. He tensed, prepared for impact. I don't know if this marriage can be what I need it to be. You've done real work. I see that. You're different than you were 6 months ago. She paused. But I'm different too. And the person I am now, I'm not sure she fits in this marriage anymore. Not because you haven't changed. Because I've outgrown the foundation we built. Robert's voice came quiet. Are you saying you want a divorce? I'm saying I need more time to know. And I need you to be okay with that uncertainty. Because I'm not deciding from pressure or guilt. I'm deciding from truth. Robert looked at Dr. Clark. Back to Linda. How much time? 6 more months, by April. 1 year from the gala. I'll know by then. Dr. Clark leaned forward. Can you live with that ambiguity, Robert? He nodded slowly. If that's what Linda needs, yes. Linda felt something release in her chest. Not relief exactly. Recognition that she had claimed the right to be uncertain, had refused to be rushed into a decision that would shape the rest of her life. Story Space continued expanding. Morrison Foundation approved Phase 2 funding in September, $125,000. Money for creative writing workshops, art integration, family literacy nights. Linda was hired full-time in August, director of programs for the Reading Foundation. Salary $68,000 annually. Her own income. Her own title. Work that was hers in ways her marriage had never been. Jessica relocated to Portland in October, took the position of education director at Story Space. They worked together daily, built curriculum, trained volunteers, watched children discover that reading could be something other than failure. Real friendship developed between them, not just trauma bonding, genuine respect and collaboration, and the particular closeness that comes from building something meaningful together. April arrived again. 1 year from the gala. Linda stood alone in Story Space after hours. Tuesday evening, rain against windows. The space quiet but alive with evidence of the children who had been there hours before. Artwork on walls. Books organized by level. Reading nooks where Tyler and 40 other kids had discovered that words could be doors instead of walls. Her phone buzzed. Text from Robert. 1 year ago tonight I lost everything that mattered. I'm grateful you gave me the chance to understand that. Whatever you decide, I respect it. Linda did not reply immediately, just held the phone, thought about the past 12 months. She thought about the woman who had walked into a ballroom in a red dress, who someone had called nobody, who had believed for years that without Robert she would disappear entirely. That woman had been afraid of being alone, afraid of insufficiency, afraid that she needed someone else's eyes to confirm she existed. The woman standing in Story Space now knew something that woman in the red dress was only beginning to understand. She had never been nobody, not when Robert stopped seeing her, not when Stephanie tracked her, not in any moment when she believed she needed external validation to be real. She had always been here, whole, capable, worthy. It had just taken losing everything to find herself standing in the rubble unbroken. The question was not whether she could survive without Robert. She knew she could, had been proving it for 12 months. The question was whether she wanted to rebuild something with him or build something entirely new, entirely hers. She did not have the answer yet. But she had time, had work, had purpose that belonged to no one but herself. Linda picked up her bag, turned off the lights, locked the door, walked to her car through cool April rain, sat behind the wheel looking at Story Space through the windshield. This thing she had built, this proof of her capacity. She started the engine, drove toward the house she shared with Robert, toward the conversation they would have soon, toward a future that was uncertain but no longer frightening, because uncertainty was not the same as powerlessness. And Linda Anderson had learned finally and completely that the only power she had ever needed was the power to choose herself. 2 weeks later, Linda and Robert sat in their living room. No therapist present, just the two of them and the accumulated weight of 13 months of rebuilding. I've made a decision. Linda's voice stayed steady. Robert set down his coffee, prepared himself. I want to try, not go back to what we had, that marriage is dead and should stay dead, but build something new, with different rules, different foundation. Robert exhaled. What would that look like? Separate finances, permanently. What I earn is mine. What you earn is yours. Shared expenses split proportionally. He nodded. Okay. My work is not negotiable. Story Space, the foundation, that comes first. Not second to your career, first. I understand. And if at any point I feel myself shrinking again, becoming smaller to accommodate you, I'm gone. No discussion, no second chances. Just gone. Robert met her eyes. That's fair. This is probation, Robert. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation. Probation. You're proving you've changed. I'm deciding if I want what you've become. How long? As long as it takes. Could be 6 months. Could be 2 years. Could be, I decide next week it's not working. Robert absorbed this. I can live with that. Linda studied him, saw something genuine in his face, also saw that genuine was not enough, would never be enough again. But it was a start. Okay then, we try. She stood, went to her studio, closed the door, left Robert sitting in the living room, understanding that he had been given a gift he did not deserve and would spend years trying to earn. Story Space's 1-year anniversary fell in May. They held a celebration. Kids performed pieces they had written in the creative writing workshops. Parents spoke about children who finally wanted to read. Volunteers who had watched transformations happen week after week. Barbara gave a speech thanking donors and partners and the foundation board. Then she turned to Linda. None of this exists without one person's vision. Linda Anderson saw a need and refused to accept that need as inevitable. She designed this space, wrote the proposal, secured the funding, built the team, made this real when it was just an idea on paper. Barbara paused. Let the room absorb that. Linda, would you say a few words? Linda stood, looked at the 60 kids sitting on the floor in the space she had created for them, spoke quietly, clearly. A year ago, someone told me I was nobody, a shadow, that I had wasted my life being invisible. The room went still. That person was wrong, not because I proved them wrong, because I had never been invisible in the first place. I had just forgotten how to see myself. She looked at Tyler, at the other kids whose reading levels had jumped, at the parents who no longer dreaded homework time. You all taught me something important, that being quiet is not the same as being weak, that building something real takes longer than building something impressive, that the work that matters most often happens in small rooms with small people who the world doesn't think are important enough to invest in. Linda's voice strengthened. Thank you for letting me build this with you. Thank you for showing up every week. Thank you for proving that when you give children space and time and belief, they become exactly who they were always capable of being. She sat down to applause that felt different than the applause at the gala. Warmer, more earned. After the event, Jessica found her in the kitchen washing glasses. That was beautiful. Linda smiled. It was true. Are you happy? Linda considered the question, looked around the space, thought about her marriage and probation, about her work that was hers, about the future that was uncertain but full of possibility. I'm something better than happy. I'm whole. Jessica hugged her. That's all any of us can ask for. June brought heat and long days and the satisfying rhythm of work that mattered. Linda woke early, went to the gym, came home to a marriage that was tentative but improving, drove to Story Space and spent hours designing Phase 3 expansion, met with donors, trained new volunteers, watched children discover that struggling was not the same as failing. Robert came home at 6 most nights. They made dinner together, talked about their days with honesty that felt new and fragile and worth protecting. Some nights were easy, some were hard, some were just ordinary. All of them were built on foundation that Linda had chosen rather than accepted. In July, Linda got a letter, hand-addressed, Seattle postmark, inside a note from Jessica. Linda, I wanted you to know that I'm dating someone. First time since Brian. His name is David. He's a librarian. We met at a literacy conference. He knows my history and he's not afraid of it. I'm not sure where this goes, but I'm trying. Thank you for showing me what it looks like to rebuild. You saved my life without knowing you were doing it. Jay. Linda put the letter on her desk, smiled at it for a long moment. Stephanie Moore sat in federal prison in California, 5 years into her 8-year sentence, eligible for parole in 3 if she maintained good behavior. She thought about Linda Anderson sometimes, about the woman she had dismissed as irrelevant, about the mistake she had made in confusing quiet with defeated. She had made that mistake before, would probably make it again. But Linda Anderson had taught her something she would not forget. That the most dangerous people are the ones you don't see coming, the ones building foundations while you're focused on facades. October came again, 2 years from the gala. Linda stood in the expanded Story Space, 2,400 square feet now, 2 full-time teachers including Jessica, 90 kids enrolled, impact metrics that made grant renewals automatic. Barbara appeared beside her. We got the call from the state. They want to replicate the model. 5 more sites across Oregon, full funding. Linda processed this. That's enormous. That's your design, your vision. They want you to lead the statewide rollout. Linda looked at the space around her, thought about what scaling would mean. More kids, more sites, more impact, also more time, more responsibility, more of her life dedicated to this work. She thought about her marriage, about Robert who was trying, who had rebuilt himself into someone better, but not someone she needed. She thought about the choice in front of her. When do they need an answer? 2 weeks. Linda nodded. I'll let you know. That evening she sat with Robert on their back porch, told him about the offer. He listened, asked good questions, did not make it about himself. Finally, what do you want to do? Linda looked at him. If I say yes, it's 60-hour weeks, travel across the state, years of my life. I know. Our marriage might not survive that. Robert met her eyes. Our marriage might not survive anyway. But this work matters. Those kids matter. If you want to do this, do it. Linda studied his face, saw genuine support, also saw resignation, the recognition that he had lost the right to be her first priority. I need to think about it. She did think about it. For 2 weeks, made lists, talked to Jessica, talked to Barbara, sat in story space after hours watching the space exist independent of her. In the end, the answer was obvious. She called Barbara. I'm in. Let's build this. The statewide rollout took 3 years. 5 sites became 10. 10 became 20. Story Space became a model for literacy intervention across the Pacific Northwest. Linda's marriage to Robert ended in the 2nd year. Not with drama or betrayal, just quiet recognition that they had become different people who wanted different lives. They divorced amicably, sold the house, split assets according to the financial separation they had maintained since the reconciliation. Robert moved to Seattle for a job opportunity. Sent Linda a message when he left. Thank you for giving me the chance to become someone better. I'm sorry it wasn't enough. I hope you build everything you're dreaming of. Linda read it, felt sad but not devastated, grateful but not regretful, replied simply, I already am. 5 years after the gala, Linda stood on a stage in Sacramento at a national literacy conference. She was 40, director of Story Space Network, overseer of 32 sites, author of a curriculum framework used in 14 states. The woman who had been called nobody was now someone universities invited to speak, someone policymakers consulted, someone whose work changed lives at scale. But the thing she was proudest of was smaller. Tyler was 14 now, reading at grade level, planning to go to college. Still came back to Story Space sometimes to volunteer with younger kids. He had told Linda once, "You made me believe I wasn't stupid. That changed everything." That quote was on her office wall now. Reminder of why the work mattered. After the conference, Linda flew home to Portland, drove to the original Story Space location, let herself in with her key, walked through the empty space, remembered the first day. Tyler's careful hands on that space book, the moment she knew this would work. Sat in the reading corner where 90 kids had discovered reading did not have to be punishment. Thought about the woman she had been 6 years ago, standing in a kitchen holding a phone with a message that destroyed her marriage. That woman had believed she was nothing without Robert, had built her entire identity around being someone's wife. The woman sitting here now knew better. She had never been nothing, had never needed someone else to make her whole, had just needed to remember that wholeness was her natural state, not something earned through approval or love or validation. Linda's phone buzzed. Text from Jessica. David proposed. I said yes. You're the first person I'm telling. Thank you for showing me what rebuilding looks like. Linda smiled. Typed back. Congratulations. When's the wedding? Next spring. You'll be maid of honor, obviously. Obviously. Linda put her phone away, looked around the space one more time. Some women find themselves by being found, by rescue, by someone else seeing their worth and showing them what they could not see alone. Linda Anderson had found herself by refusing to stay lost, by building foundations when everyone thought she was doing nothing, by understanding that the only validation she needed was the kind she gave herself. She stood, turned off the lights, locked the door, walked to her car through evening air that smelled like rain and possibility. Tomorrow she would wake up early, go to the gym, drive to the regional office, Continue building the network that was changing how America taught struggling readers. Tonight, she would go home to her apartment that was hers alone. Make dinner for one. Read a book in peace. And both of those things would be exactly enough. Because Linda Anderson had learned the most important lesson anyone can learn. That you do not need to be extraordinary to matter. You do not need to be seen by everyone to be real. You do not need permission to exist at full volume. You just need to remember that you were always whole, always capable, always worthy, and then build accordingly.